Hi Garden Grove, this is Mayor Pro Tem Stephanie Klopfenstein. I'm also a board member of the Garden Grove Neighborhood Association, and it's truly an honor to be live at Miles Square Park for a Meet on Main Unplugged with Debra Martin, the author of Chasing Coyotes, Accounts of Urban Crisis. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
We really appreciate it, definitely. Well, coyotes is a hot topic in Garden Grove currently.
Yes.
It's on all of our Facebook pages. I talk about it frequently at council meetings. The city of Garden Grove recently adopted a coyote management plan. And so I thought it'd be interesting to have you here today to talk not only about your book, but just your accounts of coyotes in Orange County and the city you live in. And hopefully we can talk about some tips and other information in our time together today. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about first and foremost, my family has been in Garden Grove since the 1800s. So we have a very long history in the city. And my grandmother is still with us at 95, and she doesn't recollect there ever being a coyote issue. When Garden Grove, for all intents and purposes, was very agrarian. We were a farming community. And obviously had quite a bit of wildlife, but even my parents and just a lot of people that live in the city for a great deal of time don't remember coyotes.
Right.
Do you have a similar story to that?
Yeah, well, basically the coyotes have always been here, but in much smaller numbers, and they pretty much remained in our parks and open areas and nature centers throughout our cities. We never saw them. They didn't come out during the daytime. They only came out at night. So, you know, at night they could have easily been mistaken for a dog. So they have been here all along. However, we have a greater number of coyotes now, and they're seen more than we have in the past. And another thing is they used to remain in those parks and open areas, and over the years they have learned that by leaving the parks and going into the neighborhoods, it's more effective hunting for them. They are more prosperous with their hunting. So due to that, they have learned to leave these open areas, go into the neighbors and hunt for their food that way. And this has happened over a period of years, and they're thriving. They're thriving because they're eating well. They eat our garbage, they eat our pet food that's left out. They eat our pets, unfortunately.
They're opportunists.
Yes, they're opportunists. They just about eat everything. They have a very, wide diet, I guess you would say, a wide range diet. In addition to insects and grasshoppers and gophers and squirrels and possums occasionally. Rabbits are their absolute favorite. They love rabbits.
I have a rabbit.
Yeah, so keep them inside.
Yes. I'll make sure to take note of that.
So yes, we're seeing more of them now. There are more of them, and the reason why is they are thriving. The population has become larger because they are eating well. Man is a great source of food for them, and they've learned that, and they are opportunists, and they're taking advantage of that opportunity.
I believe it. Well, I want to get into that a little deeper, especially as we go through some tips and kind of talk about the outreach and education component. But one thing I wanted to go back to and talk about, I guess, your story. And I know that you have a website and Facebook pages, and obviously you've written a book. So I'm guessing you have a personal story that maybe started your journey with coyote awareness and just diving so deep into this issue.
Yes, what happened was several years ago, I'd say 8 or 9 years ago, I had a neighbor who was very ill, and I ended up taking his cats in and adopting his cats. So I had a house full of cats, and I was trying to take care of those cats, and at the time we didn't even know we had coyotes in our neighborhood. Up to that point, we had heard a little bit of information around Miles Square Park here that there were coyotes coming out into the neighborhoods that are along the perimeter of Miles Square Park and attacking pets. But we never ever thought that they would venture as far south into the community where I live. So when one of my cats was attacked one night, woke up the whole entire neighborhood. That's how we finally discovered or realized that we had coyotes. People saw the coyote attacking the cat, so we knew then that we had a coyote problem, and we knew we had to do something about it.
Yeah, absolutely. So. Well, I think when we see our pets being injured or becoming a potential food source, it definitely raises our...
And your first thought is, how do I prevent this from happening again? How do I make it so that this doesn't happen to other people, to other people's pets? how do we stop this? Your first response is, I need to stop this. I need to do something about it. So that's what we did, was we started reading and doing our research and finding out all the different things that we could do to discourage them, to keep them out of our neighborhood. We hazed, we set traps, live traps, and you can do that in private communities. We never caught a coyote, and it's a good thing because we wouldn't know what to do with it if we did. Back then there was actually a group that relocated coyotes.
Oh, wow.
They were shut down shortly thereafter.
Where were they taking them?
I'm not really sure, but they were relocating them. You would call them, they'd come out, they'd pick up the coyotes, and they would take them somewhere. And so we had an in with them, and we were getting that all set up, and just as soon as we were to get that set up, they closed down. And then we later learned that relocation is actually against the law here in California. You cannot relocate coyotes.
That's good to know. I think a lot of people maybe don't know that and look at that as, well, why can't we just take them someplace else? That seems like a more humane way, but if that's against the law, then... It's
actually very inhumane, and the reason why it is, there's a couple reasons. First of all, you're moving a coyote into another coyote's territory, and that coyote will defend that territory aggressively and, to death. So usually the coyotes die trying to find their way back home, because this is their home. Wherever you've caught them, captured them, that's their home. They were probably born and raised there and have lived there all their lives. And the first thing they're going to do is try to get back home, and usually they get hit by a car when they do that, when they do try to find their way back home. Or, as I said, you've got other coyotes in other territories that has now, a coyote in their territory, and they will usually remove that coyote if it doesn't leave on its own. So,
well, in your book, some bullet points that stuck out to me was, what is the plight of the urban coyote, reducing misinformation, reducing fear, and encouraging hazing every time you see one.
Right.
So I want to go back to the first one, the plight of the urban coyote. I think this is where that education component begins. It's educating people on the urban coyote versus the wild coyotes, what their characteristics are, what they prefer to eat, how do they differ from one another, what kind of habitat do they look for, where and what kind of dens are they finding. Just kind of get into the headspace, if you will, of the urban coyotes of today.
Okay, urban coyotes today. There are distinct differences, but those differences are becoming blurred, because now we're seeing rural coyotes behave more like urban coyotes.
Interesting.
So it's actually switching. I figure it's probably a matter of years until we're already seeing in Arizona, we're already seeing rural coyotes behaving like urban coyotes. They're going into homes, they're attacking dogs off leash and killing them and taking them off. I mean, it's already happening in Arizona. It's been gradual. It's been over several years, because I keep an eye on different areas throughout the United States for various reasons, especially areas where I have relatives living, because I want to keep on top of the coyote situation to give them pointers. But right now, well, up to this point, there have been vast differences, and the differences have been that the coyotes here, the urban coyotes here, they seem to be smarter. They have learned how to work with people. As I said, they're opportunists. So they have learned how to work with people in order to benefit themselves as far as food sources and water sources. Urban coyotes will den just about anywhere. They will den in vacant homes. We see this happening a lot. Raised porches, they'll go right underneath. They only need 3 inches to slide underneath a porch.
That's not very much. And what is their clearance for fences? It's awfully high as well, isn't it, for jumping?
Actually, the California Department of Fish and Wildlife has on record a 10-foot wall a coyote has cleared. So usually when you have the taller walls, what they're doing is they're manipulating themselves by jumping onto something. Sure. Or, they can even climb trees. Coyotes are very, very agile. But usually they're manipulating themselves up to the top of the wall by jumping on something, using something as a catapult, so to speak, up to the top of the wall. A 4-foot wall they can clear without ever touching it. 5-foot wall, When you start to get a little higher, 5-foot wall, they can usually go over. 6-foot wall, now they're going to have to jump to the top and then back down to the other side. With the coyote rollers, if you do install the coyote rollers, your wall needs to be at least 6 feet tall for that reason, because they can jump a 5-foot tall wall with the coyote roller on top. They can clear it without ever touching the wall. So the coyote rollers are not effective with any wall that's 5 feet or less.
Okay, so it'd have to be a taller. And I've heard you mentioned night guard.
Night guard. Night guard, what it is, it's a little black solar powered box, and it has a flashing red light. And when the coyotes see the flashing red light, that usually they see that as an eyeball, like a human eye. They think it's a human eye. When they first came out with night guards, they said to place them at about knee level, which is the coyote eye level. No, actually when they first started, they said to place them high, at human eye level. So that's how we were doing that. Now they're saying to place them lower at knee level. It's changed over the years. They realize it's more effective at knee level because it's at the coyote's eye level, and the coyotes can see it better. Coyotes' visual range is straight ahead from their eye level, which is about 2 feet, a little over 2 feet. High. So they're looking straight ahead. That's their visual range. They usually don't see anything above that visual range. So yeah, they are very, very agile creatures. We have photos of coyotes on top of 8-foot tall walls where they have one coyote manipulated itself on vines to get to the top of the wall, and a helicopter actually got a picture, a news helicopter got a picture of that coyote on the wall. But
so they're clever.
They're very clever. They only need a 3 inches clearance in order to get through any gap. So you have to keep that in mind when you walk the perimeter of your home. You want to make sure there's no 3-inch gaps along any raised porch or along the just the floor, the bottom of your house, the perimeter of your house.
Raised foundations or any crawl spaces of any kind.
Sheds too. They'll crawl under sheds and den in there. That's very common.
Okay.
They're usually right out in the open. I just took pictures Sunday of coyotes just sitting on top of mounds of dirt, sleeping on the mounds of dirt.
Yeah.
They're usually right out in the open, but you have to have a trained eye for them. If you're not looking for them, you're not going to see them. And usually it takes a trained eye, and the way I see them is I look for movement. I usually see movement out of the corner of my eye, and that's how I see them, I spot them.
Do you find that they are still a nocturnal animal, or do you feel that that is changing as well? Because I know we get so many reports on our social media accounts in Garden Grove of them being out during the day and in the morning hours a lot.
And that's not uncommon, and it's more common in the morning because usually if they've been out hunting and they haven't caught anything, they're going to stay out hunting as long as they can to try to catch some food. They need the food, right? So seeing them in the morning is really quite common. As I said, if they haven't caught anything from their hunting the night before, they will go ahead and hunt a little longer in the morning time. So we'll see them on our way to work. They are basically nocturnal because they try to avoid people and they try to avoid cars. That, cars of course are the #1 cause of death for coyotes, being hit by a car. So
what about their breeding seasons and their mating seasons? I'm assuming those would be the times of year when people would see them the most. And then I know you mentioned in the book a little bit about maybe them decreasing with some of the rainier months and so forth. I mean, they don't hibernate, but maybe you might see them less, or is all of that just kind of gone away because of the amount that we have now?
Okay, what I was going to say earlier is that as time goes on, the coyotes become more habituated, so they become less fearful of people. And that's why it was so important for people to haze coyotes every time they see them. The more habituated they are, the less fear they have of people, the more that we're going to see them. As far as, there's only one mating season a year, and that's January, February. By March or April, the coyotes are having their pups, establishing dens and having their pups. And this time of year is when they're most active because they're taking the pups out to teach them how to hunt. So not only do you have the parents out hunting, you have the pups out hunting too.
And that might make mom or dad a little bit feistier. I mean, that might be a
They're
time.
more aggressive.
Yeah.
They're very highly protective of the pups.
Okay.
The photos that I got of the coyotes Sunday were of two parents, and I know the pups were there nearby, and I was trying to draw the pups out, and I never saw the pups.
Wow. Okay.
They're very protective. They keep the pups hidden. You don't see them.
Yeah.
I know there's 4 pups, and I've been trying to get pictures of those pups for a month now.
Wow.
So they keep them well hidden. You rarely see them. Right now the pups are not quite as big as the adults. They will be in a couple months. They will be adult size, but you can distinctly tell the difference between the pups and the adults. The pups have a real baby face.
I bet they're probably pretty
Yeah,
cute.
yeah, they are. They actually are. But the parents are very, very protective, aggressively protective of their pups. And while the coyotes are mating in January, February, and March, and during that time, the male is very protective of the female. So during those times, you have to be, as a dog owner, very concerned about your dog because they are aggressively protective not only of their mate, of their pup, but of their pups as well. So you have to keep a closer eye on your dog because they see the dog as competition during mating season. They see the dog as a threat during pup rearing season, which is what we're in now. Pretty soon those pups will be old enough to venture out on their own, probably November, December. At that point they'll be juveniles and they'll be venturing out on their own to find their own home range and territories. And they won't be so aggressive until we reach February and March again when the coyotes are mating.
Okay.
So,
Well, I want to get into some tips because I think that it's always good for people to take some ownership on their own properties, to know what they can do if they see one on their street and in their neighborhood, and share that information with their neighbors to protect themselves, their pets, and obviously small children. I know that conversation has come up numerous times, people concerned for the safety of their children. Obviously these coyotes have been seen on school campuses over the summer and still.
absolutely.
And so one of the things I thought was interesting was just good old plain white vinegar. How would you use that on your property to deter them?
Well, the white vinegar, you would use that to pour on concrete or rocks. White vinegar is going to kill grass or plants, so you have to be very careful with it. Same with ammonia.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what that does is reduce odor. And we found that people who have pets may not realize it, but they have a lot of pet odor because coyotes have hypersensitive, sense of smell. They
Sure.
can smell things that we cannot. They can see things that we cannot, and they can hear things that we cannot. So if you have a dog, first of all, the coyotes know your dog's there because the coyotes have already heard your dog, and they can also smell the dog and see the dog. So don't ever think that you can hide your dog from a coyote because they will always know when you have one. But we don't realize the odor that our pets put off, and so the ammonia and the vinegar, what that does is it reduces the pet odor. I would pour that along the side of my house in the dirt where there was no plants to reduce my cat odor because my cats always walked along the side of the house. I would pour it on the patios to reduce the odor out there. They're great household cleaning items too. I mean, they'll reduce odors inside your house as well.
Yeah.
But as far as a deterrent, I wouldn't actually classify it as a deterrent because all you're doing is reducing odor. So you're making your house less attractive. If you don't do that, when a coyote walks past your house, your coyote is going to smell your pets, and they're going to be attracted to your house.
Mm-hmm.
So
What about the idea of the wolf urine or a bear urine or something? I mean, is that worth it?
It's very controversial, but I have used it and I have found it effective. I have friends who live in Arizona that would sprinkle it along their walls, the top of their walls, to keep the coyotes out of their yards, away from their dogs, and it was effective for them too. The thought behind that is that coyotes are very smart. They're much smarter than our dogs.
Okay.
Dogs and cats. They're
Interesting.
very smart animals. All right. If a coyote comes to your house and smells wolf urine once, he may be discouraged and run away because he's not sure what it is, especially if it's a female. Females seems to be more effective with female coyotes. However, if that coyote keeps coming back to your house over and over again, smells the wolf urine and nothing happened, the coyote learns that the wolf urine is not a threat. It's nothing to be fearful of. So it would stop working. But if you're having coyotes coming to your house for the first time, the wolf urine would be effective in keeping that coyote away.
Interesting. Okay.
So it all depends on how often the coyotes are visiting. If it's the same coyotes coming to your house all the time, you know, as far as how effective the deterrent will be, whether the coyote's male or female, that all plays into factor, you know.
Mm-hmm. What about, obviously, food sources? So they're opportunists. They're obviously, we've learned, very smart. They probably can smell, they can smell your pets, they can smell your trash. If you have fruit on your property, if you have cat food left out, obviously these are all things that need to be addressed in order to probably keep your property safe from them.
Right. One thing people don't realize is there are ornamental fruits that our plants produce that the coyotes will also feed on. You don't necessarily have to have fruit trees to attract coyotes. It's not so much the fruit that attracts the coyotes, although the coyotes will eat the fruit because they'll eat anything. But it's the animals that the fruit trees attract, which are coyote prey, that attracts the coyote. So by reducing the amount of fruit, picking up the fruit off the ground, first of all, you're reducing the odor, which is good. You're probably reducing the animals that are prey to coyotes, reducing them being around that tree, which will in turn reduce the number of coyotes coming to that tree as well. But yes, they will eat fruit. They love avocados.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, really. But mostly they're attracted to the animals that the fruit trees attract. The squirrels, they love squirrels.
Rats,
oh,
all of
yeah,
that stuff.
Rats.
Prime dinner time.
Mice, possums.
Well, in your book, you talk about creating a hostile environment. What do you?
I call it coyote unfriendly.
Yeah. So give me an overview of what that looks like to you.
Okay. First of all, the greatest invention that we have had in recent years have been LED lighting. I tell you, LED lighting is the greatest. If you do not have LED lighting on outdoor lighting, you need to install it, or just buy some LED light bulbs.
Okay.
Replace those standard light bulbs with LED light bulbs. Although lights will not deter coyotes completely, they don't like brightly lit areas. They like to be kind of hidden and stay in the dark shadows. You know, they don't really care to be out in the lighting. So that's just one tool that I would say on a multi-pronged approach that I would take is increase my lighting. Make sure that increased lighting has LED light bulbs, LED lighting, much brighter, very, very bright. Yeah. Also install, well, it depends upon the city ordinance and your water, but install motion activated sprinkler systems. I tell you, sprinkler systems are a great way to haze a coyote. If you've got a coyote in your yard, just turn on the sprinklers or turn on the hose and spray that coyote, and that'll get him moving on his way. Coyotes do not like to be sprayed with water. So that's a great deterrent. Make sure, and this is probably the most important thing, all of your trees and your bushes, your hedges, your shrubs are all trimmed. You can trim the low-lying shrubs up so you can see what's behind them, because coyotes are known to hide behind bushes and just suddenly, they're the element of surprise people by jumping out of a bush in front of them. So trim up those bushes, keep trees groomed. Coyotes can climb trees, but you have to remember what coyotes will do is they're going to take the easiest possible route to get to their prey. They're not going to exert any more energy than they have to. So usually what they'll do is it'll be more of a straightforward type of approach. So they're not going to be hopping and leaping walls all over the place trying to get to prey, because they have to conserve their energy. They also have to be careful, because if a coyote injures himself, there's no place where he can go. If he injures himself, he may not be able to hunt, he may not be able to feed himself, he would die. So coyotes have to be very careful. They have to be careful of, of not injuring themselves. So
those are just things that you think are probably best practices, if possible, for people to do to humanely, if you will, keep them at bay and to keep them afraid of you. Because that's really what we want, isn't it? We want them to be scared of us.
I've had night guard on my patio now for months, for years, 3 or 4 years now, and it's been quite effective. I've never seen any coyotes on my fence. I've never seen any coyotes in my backyard. So I feel that it's been effective for me. I have tried everything. All of the things that I have mentioned in the book, I have tried them all.
Okay.
And it's not just trying 1 or 2 things. You need to try a combination of things in order to make your home less attractive to the coyote. When you make your home less attractive to the coyote, he has no reason to go there. However, you have no control over what your neighbor does, so even if you do all these things and you're still seeing coyotes, it could be something in your neighbor's backyard.
Absolutely, and that's, I think, where the outreach and the education component comes in. And again, just taking ownership of your neighborhood. This is a great topic if you're having a community watch or a neighborhood watch meeting. These are the kinds of things you can talk about with your neighbors.
Exactly.
So you can all get on the same page.
Picked up, keep the trash. It's best to keep trash in the tightly fitting, with the tightly closed lids. It's best to keep them in the garage where there's less odor, as opposed to having them on the side of your house. Where the number one thing that most cities are doing now with their parks is they're making sure that they're getting lids on the trash cans in the parks.
Yes.
They're making sure that the trash cans are being emptied on a regular basis, that there's no overflowing, especially during the holidays, when there's a lot of attendance at the park and trash is just overflowing everywhere. They're more receptive to having someone out there to keep everything picked up immediately. So that's helping a lot. But the important thing is the bushes. If you noticed in the outskirts of the park here, there really are not a whole lot of bushes. And the reason why, at Mile Square Park several years ago, they removed most of the bushes, and the reason why is so that the coyotes could not hide behind them. So a lot of people feel very safe bringing their pets here, even though we know we have coyotes over in the nature center. A lot of people feel safe here bringing their dogs here because they can see for long distances. There's no place for the coyotes to hide, and so they feel safer walking their dogs here.
That makes sense.
Actually, people who own dogs and walk their dogs, they actually have a list of favorite parks, the safest to the least, least favorite. They don't go to those bottom ones, The ones at the bottom of the list, they don't go there. But this is one of the better parks because there really is no place for coyotes to hide. In fact, I'm really surprised they even put bushes in here when this is a new building here.
Yes.
So I'm really surprised that they did that, but
so low-lying plants and making sure you can see around them.
Exactly.
And that in a lot of ways speaks to some of the drought-tolerant landscapes that we're seeing going in and around. Some of that, I think, would be better suited.
Drought-tolerant will help, yes, because it's not usually as bushy. It's more sparse, vegetation.
Definitely.
So,
in your book, you had a scientist, and the quote was, "Every time you feed or photograph a coyote, you're killing it." And the quote then goes on to say, "You teach the coyote humans are nothing to fear."
Exactly.
So kind of talk a little bit about that.
If you stop and you go, ooh, and take a picture of the coyote, instead of hazing the coyote just says, oh, well, that person's nothing to fear because, she just stood there and did this. She didn't, And that happens over and over and over again. What you've created is a habituated coyote. He has no fear of people because every time he encounters people, there's never been really a negative, effect. So, yeah, it's very true. People would rather take a picture than haze a coyote, and the problem is there are not enough people hazing coyotes. We have a few people who haze regularly, and I congratulate them on that because it is not an easy task, to haze a coyote every time you see one.
Well, for people that don't know, let's go into that. Let's talk about hazing and let's talk about what it is and why it's important and list the steps, because I think there's some people that know, there's some people that say it doesn't work, there's some that have tried it. So let's talk about that. That's important.
Okay, first of all, you're gonna make yourself look big. I don't know if I should do this, but
all right.
Make yourself look really big. And the reason why is, to coyotes, to all wildlife, there's this dominance issue. And the more dominant you are in wildlife, you're the boss.
Okay.
So
yeah,
that's how the Society of Wildlife, responds. So you want to make yourself look dominant. But more importantly, and this just happened at Cal State Fullerton last summer, a woman had a dog, was walking the dog. A coyote approached. The dog started to react and get out of control, so the woman leaned down like this, crouched down to stop the dog, to calm the dog, and the coyote attacked her, bit her. Okay, when she crouched down, she was no longer dominant, and the coyote took advantage of that.
So the mistake, she should have tried to raise herself up and made
Well,
herself
I'm
look
not
bigger.
sure what the size of the dog was. If the dog was see, that's the thing, is the problem is trying to control the dog once the coyote appears, because based on how the dog reacts will determine what the coyote does next. So if the dog was smaller, you would want to pick up the dog and hold the dog up here and then just look directly at the coyote, direct eye contact, and go away, you know, in a deep, stern voice. A strong voice. You don't want to go shoo, shoo. No, you want to, be aggressive and say, get out of here, go, get out of here. Yell at them any way you can. It doesn't even have to make sense what you're saying, just yell at them. If it's a larger dog, you want to try to push the dog behind you. But in that situation where you have a dog out of control, the first thing you need to do is get the dog under control. So she probably really didn't have, much, there wasn't a whole lot she could do in that situation. But the reason why you do want to make yourself look larger is you want to be the more dominant one. You don't want the coyote to feel that he is larger than you and that, you are, the less dominant one. So the purpose of hazing is you just want them to associate unpleasant experiences with people, because then they'll want to stay away from people. I mean, I was hazing probably twice a week for years, and it was funny because every time I'd see a coyote, I'd start running, they'd see me and they'd just start taking off. After a while, I didn't even have to haze them. All I had to do was start running and they'd start taking off. And I'm thinking in my mind the whole time, they're probably thinking this woman's some crazy lady coming after them because nobody else does it but this crazy lady. But it's helped to keep the coyotes out of my neighborhood. You go a block away and they have coyotes lounging in the grass in their yards during the daytime, the middle of the day. And that's just, to me, that's unacceptable. And I keep telling them, we need to start hazing. Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And it's because people are not hazing them. If you don't haze them, then they'll say, okay, well, this is all right because, nobody's saying it's not, so.
What about whistles? Do they work?
Whistles are noise makers, and whistles are actually great to let other people know that you're in trouble.
Okay.
The best noise makers to make are the electronic sounds because coyotes haven't heard them and they're not used to them yet.
I see.
The electronic sounds,
okay.
Such as a stun gun makes, you don't even have to use a stun gun. All you have to do is turn that stun gun on and it's enough to scare the daylights out of the coyote. They're gone in a split second. A woman had a stun gun. She had a dog. She was walking her dog, and she actually caught this all on video. Coyote comes running up to her and her dog, would not, no matter what she did, would not back down. She just grabbed that stun gun, pushed the button, zzz, that coyote was gone.
So again, it's just noises that they are not familiar with, where at this point you think whistles is something that they probably already have recognized that
They're
sound.
hearing whistles at schools every day. They're hearing bells at schools every day. Those are common, and we really do believe that they've adapted to metal. So metal pans are not as effective as they used to be because of all the shopping carts and all of the strip malls that we have for the grocery stores. That's metal. They're hearing that all day long. So, the noises that they hear all day long, they become comfortable with it. It's not going to frighten them. Electronic noises, you can actually download them on your phone, and you see a coyote just hit the app and fire away, and that coyote will take off. Well, at least it works now until they get used to that.
Are these apps that perhaps they could find on your website, or do you post these?
No,
or are
they could probably get them on the internet by downloading them.
Okay.
But no, we don't have it. Maybe I should look into that though.
Well,
it's probably a good idea.
Definitely, yeah. So public education, laws and regulation, public safety, I think are obviously three huge bullet points to this coyote issue. But what I want to get to is really this outreach and making sure the community knows how to use these tips.
Right.
That they understand how to haze. They understand the background of these urban coyotes. They have a really just good information about what to do and
Right.
what is going on.
One thing to remember is that every time you haze a coyote, they will run a few yards and then they'll stop, turn around and look at you. It happens every time. They want to see what you're going to do next. You have to keep hazing. Just taking a step forward is usually enough to get them going, but you just keep doing that until they're long gone.
Well, in the conclusion of your book, you talk about basically putting away your camera. Let's not video, let's not snap the photo,
Yeah, right.
let's haze first.
Exactly.
And I know from the dais I've talked a lot about making sure that, at least in Garden Grove, that they're calling the coyote hotline instead of posting on Facebook first. But I think I'm going to need to start saying haze first and then report to the hotline.
We're having a big problem with that. People do not like to call the police departments to report it. They do not like to do that. They would rather go to a site and report it, or better yet, social media. They want everybody on social media to know, which is good because they want their neighbors to know that there's a coyote in the neighborhood. But the problem is that information doesn't go any further. It doesn't give the city the tool that it needs to take corrective action if they need to. If they have an aggressive coyote, one that's become too habituated, and that is going to be more of a common occurrence in the future as coyotes are progressively becoming more habituated. And unless people step up their hazing efforts, we're going to see more of that in the future. So the city needs to establish a reporting method. Different cities are doing different things. Some cities have their own websites where they're reporting coyote activity on the websites. Some cities have a telephone number where they can call in. Some cities are using a combination of techniques. They're using both. They have a website, they have a phone number people can call, because you have to realize not everybody's on the computer.
Right.
You know, you have to take into consideration we have a lot of senior citizens in our community, and a lot of them don't go on the computers and they don't do these things. But they will pick up a phone and call. So
Definitely. We have the hotline number, and then we also use Coyote Catcher.
okay, great.
So talk a little bit briefly before we wrap up. What is that, and do you check that regularly, and is that a good system to be using?
I do check it periodically. Cypress, the city of Cypress, just adopted the Coyote Catcher, and they also have a designated number in their website that they also use. And actually, the Coyote Catcher helped them identify their first coyote hotspot. So it's a very, very effective tool. Dr. Quinn, Neve Quinn is her name. She monitors the sites, and if the cities want, they can be provided with monthly reports. She said she'd be willing to do that for them. But we can go on, anybody can go onto that website and see any of the reports that have been reported on there. There's also a back door that a lot of people do not know about, where you can go in and get the information on each sighting. You can, the person who reported it, telephone number, all of that. However, that's really only going to be shared with the cities for the most part in case they need to follow up. But the information that is on social media really is not going anywhere, because city officials do not recognize it. To them it's hearsay. It's not, none of it has been documented, has been, verified. So we don't know if half of these reports are even true, So
The information that we get from the hotline is crucial, especially as we're moving forward with our management plan. And I think lastly, the one thing I want to talk about is through the education process and hazing and trying to adapt to life with these urban coyotes in our cities, the conversation comes up of lethal means.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? And is this the right thing?
When coyotes become so habituated that they've become a public safety threat, then the city needs to step up and they need to remove those coyotes. We're not seeing a lot of that right now, but we have seen it. We have seen coyotes go right into homes, take pets, and run back out again.
Yes.
That is a little overly aggressive. We're seeing coyotes attacking people. That is overly aggressive, which brings up one hot point here, and that's on feeding. Never feed a coyote, intentionally or unintentionally. And what that means is never put your pet food outside, Never put your pet water dishes outside. Always keep them inside. What happens when you feed coyotes is habituation becomes accelerated, and they become much more habituated. And what happens is they will approach people and they will expect food when people have been feeding them, and when they don't get the food, they bite that person. So at that point now you have a public safety threat. You have a problem, the coyote needs to be removed. So every time you feed a coyote, you kill a coyote, because they become habituated, and eventually they have to be removed because they're a public safety threat. And once a coyote starts biting, they will continue to bite. We saw that happen in Irvine in 2015. There was a woman who was feeding the coyotes, and until they finally discovered who the woman was who was doing this, there were 5 or 6 people bitten.
Wow.
And what they do is they do DNA testing. They look for a DNA match, and they just keep killing coyotes until they get that DNA match. Once that DNA match is obtained, they stop killing the coyotes. But that's the only way that they can handle the situation. They need to remove the threat immediately, and that's the only way they can do it, is to go ahead and kill the coyote, get the DNA, test it, see if it's a match. If it's not a match, they go back out and keep killing and keep killing. So yeah, 9 coyotes were removed. 6 people were bitten because one woman was feeding coyotes.
So that's really the moral of the story here. We cannot feed them. We have to remove all food sources. We have to take ownership of our properties to protect ourselves.
Right.
And keep them scared of us as much as possible.
But most importantly, you have to realize that coyotes exist everywhere. And the way coyotes hunt is they move from one neighborhood to the next. They'll hunt in one neighborhood until it's hunted out. Then they'll move to the next neighborhood, then the next neighborhood, then the next neighborhood, until they've gone full circle to where they've started. By that time, their food source has replenished itself, and the cycle starts all over again. So even though a coyote may not be in your neighborhood today, that does not mean a coyote will not be in your neighborhood tomorrow. So you need to always be diligent in protecting your pets. You need to be careful. Do all of the pointers that we've established as far as reducing pet odor or removing pet odor and trash odor, and picking up fruit, and even cleaning barbecues. I mean, that's important too. A lot of people never think about that, but a dirty barbecue, it smells like food to the coyote. Just little things like that. Even just moving patio furniture around on your patio will discourage coyotes, because they like to feel comfortable. They like to be in familiar places. When you move your patio furniture around, it becomes unfamiliar to them, and they feel uncomfortable with that. So just little things like that, that you can do to keep the coyotes out.
Absolutely. Well, we could talk for hours about this. That's why you need to get this book. And if you would you plug your website? Is it coyotesinorangecounty.com?
Right, Coyotes in Orange County, California. It's actually on Facebook. And we've been around for 8 or 9 years. We're actually the first group that started, so
you've been at this a while. You know what you're doing.
Yes,
you're veterans at this coyote.
A long time. Right.
Well, the book is Chasing Coyotes: Accounts of Urban Crisis. And Debra, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to speak with us today.
It was nice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
This Meet on Main has been brought to you by the Garden Grove Neighborhood Association. Like us on Facebook at Garden Grove Neighborhood Association. Follow us on Instagram at ggna.2003, or become a member by emailing us at membership.ggna@gmail.com.